In the deserted and desolate city, two figures cautiously moved forward, afraid of attracting zombies with any noise. They were Carol and Daryl, who were tracking the car. Since they ran out of gas, they lost track of the group and didn't know their exact whereabouts. They arrived at a large building, planning to take a break. They gazed at the scenery outside, wonder what the city has been through. At that moment, Daryl seemed to have spotted something. He took the binoculars from Carol's hands and started observing. There was a car on the distant bridge with a cross symbol on it. It must be the group's vehicle, and perhaps there were clues inside. Without hesitation, the two swiftly made their way towards the car. Just as Carol threw her gun over and was about to climb through, she was unexpectedly intercepted by a boy who had grabbed the gun. It was Noah, who had managed to escape. He asked Daryl to put down his crossbow and, with no other option, they had to put their weapons on the ground. Noah picked up the crossbow and slung it over his shoulder. Then, he cut open the tent. He didn't want to kill anyone. He just wanted to use the zombies as a barrier to slow them down. Carol used her handgun to kill one of the zombies, and then she aimed it directly at Noah. However, Daryl intervened and prevented her from shooting. The two of them quickly chased after Noah, but the boy had already escaped. Carol was puzzled by why she wasn't allowed to shoot him. Daryl explained that he was just a kid, and they could find more weapons. Soon, they arrived at the car. Nearly 1/3 of the car was hanging outside the bridge. Daryl opened the car door, and they began searching inside. Carol looked outside and noticed that the zombies were gradually gathering around the car. They needed to leave this place quickly. Just as the two were preparing to leave, Daryl saw a message on a stretcher. It suggested that Beth might be in this Grady Memorial Hospital. Carol fired 3 shots in succession, emptying the last 3 bullets in her handgun. They couldn't dwell on it for now because the zombies were closing in. With too many zombies, they had no choice but to retreat back into the car and close the door. The number of zombies kept increasing, making it impossible for them to escape. They realized the situation was dire. With the car at risk of being pushed off the bridge, quickly pulled Carol into her seat and fastened their seatbelts as a precaution. The car started shaking violently, and both of them were breathing heavily. They exchanged a glance, unsure if they would survive the fall. Carol closed her eyes, and in the next second, the airbags deployed just in time. They were fortunate to have survived, although their organs were aching from the impact. Supporting each other, they continued towards the hospital. They arrived at a building across from the hospital, providing a good vantage point to observe the situation inside. If anyone entered or exited the hospital, they would be visible from there. Suddenly, gunshots echoed from inside the building, confirming that someone was there. Carol and Daryl swiftly moved out to investigate. They came across a zombie pinned by Daryl's crossbow arrow, indicating that Noah was in the vicinity. Soon after, they heard a series of consecutive gunshots. Carol hurried over to the source and found Noah pushing a zombie towards her. Luckily, Daryl was right behind her. Afterwards, Daryl quickly caught up and found Noah in a room, preparing to move a bookshelf. Without hesitation, Daryl charged forward like a wild bull. Noah is terrified and pleads for Carol and Daryl's help. However, Daryl believed that Noah had been tracking them and was ready to leave him behind. The boy's act of pushing a zombie towards Carol had angered Daryl, but Carol hesitated at this moment. Could they really just abandon him? Getting eaten by zombies was inevitable for Noah. Daryl was genuinely angry and left without looking back. Meanwhile, the zombies emerged and began pulling at Noah relentlessly. Carol grew anxious, and a crossbow bolt struck the zombie's head. Daryl still had a soft heart and he moved the bookshelf to one side. Noah came out, repeatedly expressing his gratitude. Then, his first instinct was to run to the window and announce that he had to leave. The sound of gunfire would surely attract the people in the area.
Oh, there are people at the hospital.
Wait, just tell us.
Is there a blonde girl there? You see a blonde girl? Beth?
The 3 of them were equally shocked to hear that this kid knew Beth. Noah quickly explained that Beth helped him escape but got captured in the process. At that moment, a car arrived downstairs. The 3 of them realized they had to leave immediately and headed towards the lobby. Unfortunately, as Carol ran out, she was knocked down by the approaching group. Daryl was about to charge out, but Noah stopped him and reassured him that they were the only hope to save their friends. They had medical supplies and doctors, and killing the others wouldn't solve anything. They could find another chance to save Beth and Carol. It was just that the enemy had more people and weapons, which explained why Beth saw Carol at the hospital. Daryl also calmed down and realized that fighting alone would be futile. He and Noah got into the car, planning to return to the church and gather a rescue party. Rick wouldn't just sit idly by. By the time Daryl and Noah arrived at the church, It was already evening. Daryl returned to the church with Noah. Rick takes immediate action and prepares to go to the rescue. Michonne stayed behind to protect Carl and Judith. To prevent any mishaps, they fortified the church. Meanwhile, inside the hospital, Beth quietly entered the ward where Carol was lying. Still unconscious, she didn't dare to reveal that she knew Carol. In the afternoon, Beth was mopping the floor as usual while one of the officers was briefing Dawn on the situation. The man mentioned that the woman they had rescued earlier was critically injured with no signs of improvement. He suggested removing the medical equipment to avoid unnecessary waste. But Beth couldn't just stand by and watch Carol being given up on. She immediately questioned the man, asking why they were charging their useless radio every day when their resources were limited. The woman they saved had only been here for a day. If they couldn't even save a person in this place, what was the point of their existence? Dawn interrupted Beth's words directly and decided to follow the man's suggestion. She ordered to stop the medical treatment and remove the equipment from Carol. If she managed to survive, it would be her luck. The man was pleased with Dawn's decision and left the room. Once he was gone, Dawn then said to Beth, "I also want to save that woman, but you don't understand how fragile my authority is. I can't directly help her, so if you want to save her, you'll have to take matters into your own hands." Saying that, Dawn took out a key and told Beth, "This key can open the medication storage room. It's extremely valuable in the hospital." She then handed the key to Beth, leaving her somewhat surprised by Dawn's sudden change of heart. Beth proceeded to find Dr. Stephen, with whom she had a decent relationship. She straightforwardly asked him, "What medicine would you use if you were treating that patient?" The doctor immediately guessed that Beth had the key in her hand. He warned her, saying, "If Dawn gave you that key, she definitely has ulterior motives." However, Beth couldn't concern herself with that right now. Saving Carol was more important than anything else. After a moment's thought, the doctor told her, "Inject 5 milliliters of adrenaline. It won't wake her up immediately, but it will stabilize her blood pressure and give her a chance to survive." Beth nodded and left the room. She then proceeded to the hallway outside the ward, where she handed something to an elderly man. It was a scarce commodity, a strawberry. The old man understood the significance of it and immediately pretended to feel unwell, attracting the attention of the on-duty police officers. His performance was so convincing that no one suspected anything. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Beth quickly opened the cabinet. Fortunately, she had often assisted her father in surgeries, so she quickly found the adrenaline. She calmly locked the cabinet again, as if nothing had happened, and casually walked past the old man, who understood that his task was complete. Quietly, Beth opened Carol's hospital room and concealed the infusion equipment in the bedsheets. Looking at the calm Beth, couldn't help but marvel. The Beth who was once on the farm was timid and even attempted suicide after her mother's death. She used to hide in her father's embrace when faced with difficulties. She now has her own opinions and is both brave and clever in what she does. After finishing the infusion work, she softly called out to Carol and held her hand, hoping she would wake up soon. Otherwise, she would be at the mercy of these people. Meanwhile, Rick and the others had arrived near the hospital. They gathered together to discuss how to rescue the people inside. Originally, Rick had planned a direct assault in the evening. Since Noah had spent a year there, he knew the layout well. The plan was to break the lock of the staircase door, proceed to the 5th floor, take out the guards, and then rescue their people. Tyrese, however, didn't want to kill anyone or cause harm to their own people. They could lure the police out in the city, capture them and exchange them for hostages. This way, no one would suffer any losses, and they could all go their separate ways. Daryl also thought it was a good idea, and eventually, Rick agreed as well. Take action on this. Noah fired shots in the city, quickly drawing the attention of the police who began to pursue him. During this time, they had been searching for Noah. 2 police officers, a man and a woman, intercepted him. Noah cooperated fully and put down his weapon. The bald policeman came up and tied his hands straight away and told Noah to speak up if he felt tight. It seems this policeman is one of the few decent people. At this moment, Rick and the others emerged with their guns and told the 2 police officers to cooperate, emphasizing that nobody would be harmed if they complied. Now the situation is stronger than the people and they had to give in. The bald police officer stood up and asked Rick, noting his manner of speaking and his overall demeanor, if he was a police officer. Rick looked at him in astonishment. The bald cop said he used to be one, so they were peers. Noah also came over and added that his name was Bob and that he was a very nice man in the hospital. Bob would have supported us. Just then, a car came rushing towards them, and they immediately opened fire. However, they missed the driver and instead helped 2 people escape. Fortunately, Sasha managed to shoot and burst the car's tires. Rick quickly led the group in pursuit. The car stopped. The two tied up flee quickly towards the inside. The group chased after them. Daryl stayed behind to inspect the car since the driver was nowhere to be found. As he checked the vehicle, the driver suddenly jumped out, and a fierce fight ensued between them, given the graphic violence on the ground. It won't be described here. Finally, Rick arrived in time to save Daryl. Now they had 3 hostages, increasing the chances of an exchange. The hostages understood Rick and his group's intentions and expressed that they held no deep grudges. They even offered to help actively, believing that a peaceful resolution would benefit both sides. Subsequently, Rick had a private conversation with the police officer, Bob, and learned valuable information about Dawn. Rick expressed his gratitude and decided to make the deal 10 minutes later. Sasha kindly offered Bob a bottle of water, but he declined, mentioning that he saw a familiar zombie in the parking lot. He requested Sasha's assistance in giving his acquaintance a final farewell. Sasha didn't hesitate and accompanied the officer to the 2nd floor. Bob pointed out a location for her, and she began scanning for the target. However, at that moment,
Are you sure that's him?
Bob swiftly ran away. Although he wants to help Rick and the others, he is not willing to let his life be controlled by others. However, at that moment, Rick drove up in his car, shouting for Bob to stop. Seeing Bob unaffected, Rick made a ruthless decision. He accelerated and crashed into Bob, rendering him immobile. Bob cried out for Rick to save him. Rick remarked that it didn't have to come to this and that Bob only needed to stop. Bob requested to be sent back to hospital for treatment, but Rick didn't want the trouble. He was willing to do whatever it took to protect his team. Rick returned to the parking lot alone, deciding not to disclose Bob's death to the other 2 individuals. He thought they might resist fiercely during the hostage exchange if they knew. Rick was about to find an excuse to say that Bob had unfortunately met his demise. However, the woman spoke up first, claiming that Bob had been attacked by zombies. "We saw the process with our own eyes." The woman was smart. She had guessed that Bob was dead. Rick was pleased with her performance. He turned to the other man and hinted that if he didn't cooperate, he might meet a similar fate. The man hesitated for a moment. He did not want to sacrifice himself and agreed that Bob was devoured by the zombies. One day ago, Abraham's team, leaving the church, headed smoothly towards Washington. They were in high spirits, believing that they would save the world once they reached Washington. Maggie speculated that Daryl and Carol might have already returned. However, Eugene had a worried expression on his face. Don't know what's on his mind. Whenever someone asked him about solving the disaster, he would spout a bunch of incomprehensible technical jargon or claim it was classified military information. At that moment, there was a loud explosion from the vehicle, causing it to veer uncontrollably on the road and eventually crash into another car. Flipping over, the music inside continued to play, attracting nearby zombies. Abraham quickly regained consciousness and his first concern was for Eugene. Fortunately, everyone else was unharmed, helping each other to stand up and immediately called out for Eugene. They couldn't afford to lose him. The fate of saving the world relied on him. Seeing everyone safe and sound, Glenn took command without hesitation, leading the way alongside Abraham. The rest of the group followed closely. They wasted no time. Abraham kicked open the car door, and the 2 of them rushed out to clear the way. Maggie and Rosita followed suit. Eugene comes out with a dumbfounded look on his face. He had no idea how to kill zombies and could only watch in a daze as the others protected him. That was just his nature. Despite being extremely intelligent, he was incredibly timid, with combat skills that were practically non-existent. 3 minutes later, all the zombies were eliminated. Abraham spoke up. "We can't stop now. We must keep moving. Saving the world is our mission." Unexpectedly, Eugene interjected, saying, "We've had a serious car accident, and there are many obstacles on the road. We can go back to the church and reconsider our plans." As soon as Eugene voiced his suggestion, he faced opposition from Abraham. In Abraham's dictionary, there was no such thing as turning back. It was just like a war, where all difficulties had to be overcome, and retreat was not an option. And so, the group set off again, hoping to find a usable vehicle nearby. They took shelter in a library for the night, everyone fantasizing about Eugene saving the world and returning to a normal society. The next day, they found a functional fire truck nearby, and Abraham couldn't stop smiling. They drove for a while but had to stop and rest when the engine overheated. At that moment, a foul smell wafted over, and they all sensed something ahead. The group decided to investigate together and were astounded when they arrived at the scene. The sight was horrifying beyond belief. with a dense horde of zombies blocking their path. It was impossible to pass through. Glenn immediately led the others back, as trying to cross that area would be tantamount to suicide. Abraham was the only one mumbling in place, repeating the words, "I will not surrender." No matter how others tried to persuade him, he wouldn't listen. He insisted on not turning back and didn't even consider taking a detour. His sole focus was to reach Washington as quickly as possible. In the face of the others' well-intentioned words, he erupted in anger and shouted,
"I knew it! And that means we are not going south, going around, or going back!"
Then, he marched directly toward Eugene, grabbing him and intending to take him back to the fire truck. His plan was to step on the gas and charge through. Seeing his rough demeanor, the others rushed to intervene and tried to dissuade him. However, Abraham had already reached a state of frenzy and forcefully pushed them away. Chaos ensued. Unable to bear it any longer, Eugene spoke loudly, confessing, "I'm not a scientist." He repeated it 3 times, and everyone fell silent. Looking at him, Eugene shuddered and continued, "I lied. I'm not a scientist, and I don't know how to stop this." The others wore expressions of disbelief. Eugene went on, "I know I'm smarter than most people, and I had a hunch that the chances of survival in Washington were slightly higher, but I have no combat skills. That's why I thought of deceiving some people to take me there." Abraham's conviction crumbled in an instant. Rosita, with a quivering voice, said, "So many people have died to help you get this far." In fact, Eugene remembered the name of every person who had sacrificed their lives. He continued, "The closer we get to Washington, the more anxious I become. That's why I've been trying to find ways to stop us from moving forward. I tampered with the previous vehicle, and just now I realized I couldn't keep it hidden any longer. I can't let everyone die in vain." Abraham couldn't bear it any longer. He approached Eugene and delivered a powerful punch, using every ounce of his strength. He wanted to kill the bastard. Rosita stood in front of Abraham, stopping him, with her hand already on her gun. Abraham looked at his hand, then turned around and walked away. Meanwhile, Eugene was beaten senseless and lay unconscious, passed out and unresponsive. Abraham knelt down at the front of the vehicle. He was truly broken, reflecting on the first time he saw Eugene, during the eschatology when his wife and son had already died. Abraham felt that living in this world had no meaning. He had taken out his gun, prepared to end his own life. When he noticed 3 zombies chasing a man in the distance, without hesitation, he stepped forward and killed them. Eugene hurriedly thanked him, but Abraham paid him no attention. He only wanted to continue leaving this world. Seeing Abraham's formidable combat skills, Eugene directly called out to him,
"I have a very important mission."
It was that statement that reignited Abraham's fighting spirit. From that point on, he was determined to escort Eugene to Washington. It was his mission to solve the damn virus, but now even that was a lie from this bastard. Rosita tried to offer him water, but he slapped it away. He was now a powder keg. Even glaring angrily at Rosita, seeing him so volatile, Maggie pointed her gun at him. To their surprise, he showed no fear and even hoped that Maggie would shoot him. Then he turned around and knelt on the ground. One was in despair, while the other was unconscious. The group decided to go nearby and find some food. Maggie volunteered to stay behind and take care of the 2 of them, while Glenn took the 2 women with him to search. After they left, Maggie couldn't bear to see Eugene lying exposed to the scorching sun. She took a ladder from the vehicle and propped it against the front of the fire truck. Then she placed a blanket on it. Even though Eugene lied to them, can't kill him. As the evening approached, Glenn and the other 2 still hadn't returned. Maggie handed Abraham a bottle of water. He had been kneeling for the entire afternoon. Abraham finally spoke and said, "Initially, I thought I wanted you to shoot me, but the truth is, I don't want to die now." After kneeling for so long, he had gained some clarity. Setting aside Eugene's deception, Rosita was his wife, and he still had the will to survive. At that moment, they heard a commotion in the distance, and both of them became alert. It turned out that Eugene had regained consciousness. Maggie hurriedly reassured him and told him not to move. Abraham also felt somewhat guilty for beating Eugene like that. Then he picked up the water from the ground. Life had to go on. Meanwhile, Glenn and the others had caught some fish and returned to the road.